this movie's been on my watch list for a while, and I was trying to find like a right time to watch it, just because I'm really curious about this movie. But I don't know, it never happened, so I'm just gonna review it now. Fuck it. So this movie is called Caligula. Now, the story behind this movie is almost as interesting as the movie itself. Not to say that this movie isn't interesting. It's a very interesting movie. But the background behind this movie is also very funny. So, you got three key players here. You got the screenwriter, Gore Vidal. You got the founder of Penthouse, the magazine. His name is Bob Guccione. And you have another producer, Rossellini, and Tinto Brass. So, I'll try to put that all around my head so you guys can follow along. So basically, the founder of Penthouse and Rossellini wanted to do a movie about Caligula. Now, when you have a movie that's being produced by the founder of Penthouse, you expect there to be some sex, and there is some sex in this movie, and we'll talk about that. So they initially hired Gore Vidal to write the screenplay here. Now, Gore Vidal is an Italian filmmaker, and he's known for having these big scenes of gay sex. He was a proud promoter of the LGBT community. Now, the problem is that having a screenplay with a lot of gay sex in it does not really appeal to the founder of Penthouse. And that's exactly what happened. Gore Vidal had nothing but gay sex scenes in his movie, and had one heterosexual scene in the film, and that heterosexual sex scene just so happened to be involving incest. So, Guccione got very angry at him. Regardless, he hired Tinto Brass to direct this movie, and Tinto Brass had a bit of a different direction than what Gore Vidal had. And at the end of the day, it was just three different movies slapped into one. Malcolm McDowell is in it. People might know him from A Clockwork Orange. He's a very talented actor. And you have these big names like Dame Helen Mirren and Peter O'Toole. And it's just so confusing to me. It's like you have this movie by Penthouse, yet you have these stars like Dame Helen Mirren and Peter O'Toole, just these big Shakespearean actors, and just these very visual sex scenes, which, I don't know if they knew what they were getting into, but a lot of the people surrounding this movie have distanced themselves from it. I think Tinto Brass tried to walk away from this. Tinto Brass, got fired from this movie during editing, and the founder of Penthouse decided to edit the rest of the movie. There's three directors credited to this movie. There's Tinto Brass, Guccione, and Giancarlo Louis. You got three directors in this movie. Gore Vidal sued Penthouse because he wanted to take his name off of the movie. He didn't want to be credited. He got paid $250,000 to write that screenplay, and he still didn't want his name attached to this movie. Overall, this movie was a production disaster. It took 4 years to make this movie. Cost so much money. It was the most expensive independent film at the time. Roger Ebert, the great Roger Ebert film critic, gave this movie a 0 stars and walked out of the theater halfway through. But since then, this movie has kind of gotten a cult following just for how fucking weird this movie is. And to the point that Leo DiCaprio, in an interview, someone asked him what were your influences for his performance in The Wolf of Wall Street, and he credited Malcolm McDowell's performance as Caligula as an influence for The Wolf of Wall Street. And you can kind of see the parallels in their performances, but not only in their performances, also in the structure of both stories. This movie is about the fall of the Roman Empire, and you can argue that The Wolf of Wall Street is a bit about the fall of Wall Street. You're taking Wall Street, which is this gluttonous mess that's that keeps partying, keeps making money, keeps partying, and all of a sudden, boom, Wall Street crash of 2008, shit goes haywire. And a lot of that is similarly structured in the movie Caligula. Now, I'm going to talk about the movie for a bit, because I actually like this movie. So, as I said before, this movie follows Caligula, who becomes the new Caesar of Rome, and an unpopular pick because he is a very mischievous individual, very jealous individual as well. When I say this movie is very gluttonous, that's a very intentional thing. I think of Rome, like people think of Rome as these soldiers and yada yada yada, whatever. I think of Rome as this very gluttonous time in human history. They had like vomitoriums, places where people can just go and vomit because they would eat so much food. Gladiators, lions, feeding Christians to the lions, huge orgies. I went to Pompeii once, and there's fucking sex paintings all over the walls. I was walking in the sidewalk of Pompeii. There's a random dick on the fucking road. I'm not making this shit up. So it's a very gluttonous time, and this movie does a really good job at portraying that. And I don't know if it's portrayed accurately, but it does get across. And one might say this movie is too much because you see real life sex in this movie. A lot of the cast members in this movie, apart from the main cast of Peter O'Toole, Helen Mirren, and Malcolm McDowell, a lot of them were employees of Guccione, who owned Penthouse. So they're doing a lot of real-life sex in this movie. But honestly, this movie is such a marvel to look at. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Paul, you dirty dog. It's not for that reason. I just find, like, this movie is like looking at a Michelangelo painting where everyone is just posing naked, doing a certain position while something's going down. I've got a lot of that vibe too, and I can kind of get what Tinto Brass was going for with that style. Scenes of orgies or scenes of excess in these movies are really taken to the extreme. One might think it's too extreme, but it's the theme of gluttony. Like, of course you're gonna break the threshold of extreme. So you have these scenes with these giant orgies going on that fill out the whole set, and in the background there's like people juggling, people on like tightrope walking, and you have just people jerking off, and then people in disguises, and the lighting is a mix of green and red and stuff like that. This movie is just crazy. It throws everything at you, and it really makes you nauseated, and I think that's the vibe I got from this movie. Yes, this is a Penthouse movie, okay? And I understand why the actors and the director and the screenwriter wanted to distance themselves from this movie. But sometimes it's just the creative talent managed to shine through in this movie. A movie that also had a lot of creative troubles. Let's take a movie like Spider-Man 3, for instance. I can see where the studio interfered in that movie. But I feel like Sam Raimi just managed to shine through and give it his all. And I can still kind of catch the points where this was Sam Raimi. This is so Sam Raimi. And it makes me enjoy the movie regardless of the producer who had his fingers in the pie. I get the vibe with this movie too. This movie is so crazy, and I really understand what the creative talent was trying to go for in this movie. Everything is just so, like, so much. Again, comparing it to Wolf of Wall Street. Wolf of Wall Street had these really explicit sex scenes, but it was never really erotic to me. I think of that scene on the airplane where everyone's getting laid, and the camera's just going here, going there, going everywhere. There's a lot of those kinds of scenes in this movie as well. This movie is a lot more graphic than Wolf of Wall Street. This movie is rated X. So don't watch it with your parents, folks. And if you're a history teacher and you somehow tumbled across this video, this is not the kind of movie you show to a history class. And anyway, and not only is like the sets and the visuals and everything in this movie very gluttonous, just the stuff that happens in this movie as well. Like, you have Caligula, and he's like in love with his sister and in love with this prostitute, and he's just like all over the place. And there's this really disgusting scene where he brings a man into a kitchen with a woman that he thinks is attractive, and he takes his fist and shoves it up his ass and fists him. It's just like a very extreme movie.
In the name of the Senate, open your eyes, Livia, and the people of Rome!
That's what I mean. You can look at this movie and be like, oh, that's too far, this is too much, it's too much. I like the fact that it went that far. And it's one of those things, this is such an odd collaboration, you're never gonna get a movie like this again. The closest thing I can think of in recent years that reminded me of this movie is the movie Climax by Gaspar Noé. The ending just had this crazy sex scene, but you kind of can't see what's going on, the lighting is a little faded, and the camera's kind of moving all around, and it's not as, like, graphic in your face, but it does convey that theme of, like, gluttony and just, like, too much, and you're like, oh my god. The sets in these are very beautiful, and a lot of this is, acts like a movie like Ben-Hur, or all those biblical epics from the 50s. It was very reminiscent of that. You had those beautiful matte paintings, but it still felt very stage-like. It's almost like you're watching a high-end produced play. And I kind of like that, because you're taking the traditional Ben-Hur look, and you're injecting it with this gluttony, and like this style that Tinto Brass brings to it. I was thinking about this as I was watching this movie, and I was thinking, like, what if, like, one day, like, Tarantino wanted to make a movie, and it was gonna be NC-17? Would he just go to Pornhub and be like, yo, I want to get this movie made? Let's just fucking do it. Let's get it over with. Cause I can see something like that happening. Who knows? In the fucking days of streaming where everything is going online, you can very easily have a movie be like a Pornhub premium film. If I was a director and some studio said, hey, you need to trim this down to an R rating, I'd be like, fuck that. Hey, yo, Pornhub, what you up to? Nah, I don't know if I'd do that. I probably would do that. I'm a crazy fuck sometimes. But, yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm just gonna go through some clips, some parts here. One scene that particularly stood out in this movie to me is the scene where they have this huge wall, and at the end of the wall there's these blades that are running around, and they're pushing the wall and cutting people's heads off because they're buried underground. The cinematography in this movie is also very well done, I find. There's that shot at the end where, spoiler, Caligula dies. There's a shot of him dead at the end with Helen Mirren, who's also dead next to him. And there's this shot of people cleaning the blood, and the blood is spilling down the stairs as they're, like, laying there dead. I feel like people were quick to dismiss this movie. You gotta think this movie came out in 79, and this was a very, very graphic movie for 1979. Heck, it's a very graphic movie for 2021. If this movie came out in 2021, I think they would cause a huge uproar. I think the Christian community would get very pissed off. I think the feminist community would get very angry. I think every community, there's not one community who's gonna not get offended by this kind of movie if this came out in 2021. But I feel like this movie kind of, it kind of was too closely associated with the Penthouse name. Penthouse did make movies before this movie. Most notably, they made the movie Chinatown, which is a classic film. It's well regarded. It stars Jack Nicholson. The problem is, in the marketing, this was marketed as a Penthouse film, so people were quick to dismiss it. But it actually has a point to its madness. It's not just pornography. It's not pornography, this movie. If anything, it really turned me off because it's just so much excess that you just, like, ugh. Like, I don't get turned on by this kind of stuff. Compassionate sex turns me on, not gross orgies. But overall, this is just a crazy movie. If you're a fan of these sword and sandals kind of movies, I'm not like a big fan of those. Or if you're a fan of these big Ben-Hur or like those kind of movies, I suggest you watch this movie. It's a very different movie from that, but it definitely does have its own voice. And like, regardless of whether you like it or not, I think you'll walk away remembering this movie, which is like the best compliment I can give to a movie. I'll remember it. This to me is like a 7 out of 10. It was a good time. Watch it with the kids, folks. Go on, watch it with the kids. Have a family night. Screw Disney Plus. You can watch Caligula.
In the most controversial film ever made, Caligula, no rumor can match the reality.